Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are back after a week off of just trying to get our heads wrapped around starting sports and COVID. And so we have a new episode with Brittany Backofen, who is an athletic trainer in Nevada and also the rep in Nevada for the ATs Cares team. That is the main focus of this discussion and just talking about what ATs Care and what that program is and what it can really do for you. And beyond that, just talk about some of the common things that they have seen as a group within the athletic training profession that really has been the focus of what they are doing to try and help peer-to-peer professionals within athletic training get through some of the tough times, no matter what that might be. So it's a very good episode with a lot of information on that. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Please check them out as you get ready to continuously order throughout this upcoming year. Without further ado, enjoy this episode. This episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Brittany Backofen. We are going to be talking primarily about ATs Care today and everything that kind of comes around with that. We were just catching up on life in Vegas, where Brittany is located, and everything that's going on there. As this recording on June 15th, all the casinos just opened, so that was interesting to hear the backstory. But before I keep rambling, I'd like to turn it over to Brittany to just give an introduction on your background, how you ended up where you were, and definitely how you got connected with ATs Care.
Sure. Yeah. So small resume bit. When first studied athletic training at University of Michigan, moved out to Vegas for grad school because it was going to basically get paid for. Right now, I am the athletic trainer, and I am also the physics department at Chaparral High School in Las Vegas, Nevada. New role for me, I'm now the secretary of the Nevada Athletic Trainers Association. And within the past year, I am now on the Nevada ATs Care team. So how I got into ATs Care is kind of a bit of a story. So I've been the AT at SHAP for 7 years now. And I feel like every high school has like that one great athlete. We had, we live in a lower the high school is in a lower socioeconomic area. And so, we really try and root for these really great athletes to kind of move out and, go on to do kind of bigger and better things. And one of those student athletes, his name was Richard Nelson. He was a 3-sport athlete, incredible at football, incredible at basketball, incredible track athlete. He was one of those kids that, you needed some points for your track team. And so they'd be like, Richard, could you please do the high jump? Like, I know you haven't practiced it in like 3 weeks, but could you please we need points for high jump. And so he'd be like, oh, okay, fine. And he would do the high jump and end up winning the event and then qualify for regionals and all in one day. And so just incredible guy. And so he got a scholarship to play at Missouri State, I think, University. And so he went out there for his freshman year. He redshirted his first year, trying to get bigger and stronger. Came back for winter break. I remember seeing him at school, like just kind of mess around with him. Hey, how's your first year going? Came and watched a basketball game, all that kind of good stuff. And the day he was supposed to leave, his flight got delayed. And so he was at home, and his sister and her girlfriend got in a fight out in front of their house, and somebody had brought a gun, and he got shot on his front lawn, died in his mother's arms.
Oh, wow.
It was completely devastating for our entire like athletics community, just our entire like school community.
Sure.
I remember like standing out in front of our school, and there's like, you have football coaches and basketball coaches and track coaches, and they're, kind of supposed to be the tough guys, and we got all this bravado, and they are just bawling their eyes out. I mean, uncontrollably crying. And like, it's an interesting spot to be in as an athletic trainer, because, you always feel like you have to be the person who's calm, cool, and collected. Like you kind of have, you kind of have it together. And, you kind of are like bottling up these emotions. And, I remember like going back into my office and shutting the door and just being like, I just need to just cry this out, because I couldn't hold it in anymore. And so the PT company that I worked for, we have like these monthly meetings, and I remember going to this monthly meeting after he passed away. One of my former students was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe he passed away. Like I remember he was like the first athlete I ever interacted with when I was your student. And like, that was like another dagger. And so Todd Hamburg, who is, I think he's the treasurer of FWADA. He's really huge into advocacy. Love him to death. Shout out to Todd. I went up to him because he's one of the older athletic trainers of the group. No offense, Todd. And I said, Todd, like you've been around the block a couple of times, right? Like, have you ever had an athlete pass away on you? And he was just so nonchalant about it. He was like, yo, yeah, like somebody like last month, former athlete like passed away. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know how you're dealing with this, but I'm dying. Like, I don't know. I'm not handling this well, however somebody handles this.
Sure.
And he was like, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this person. They're in this thing called ATs Care. It's a group specifically designed for this. And so they had gotten into contact with them, and he like had texted me, had like called me, and they kind of helped me just process what I was feeling and kind of what was going on at the time, and was just an incredible resource for me, especially as a young professional, to kind of help process what was going on. And so I was like, well, this was really helpful for me. I'm probably not the only one who's ever done this. And so why don't I get involved in this? And so that's kind of how I got to learn a little bit more about it, did some research about what the group was, and, kind of the training that you need in order to do it. And now I'm a huge advocate for it. So here I am.
That's quite the story on how to get there.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes those are the best ones. So that takes us right into our first question, is just what is ATs Care for those that might not completely know about it? And I know you mentioned, interventions and trainings, and you've got that on the list to cover. So I'm curious as to what all those things entail.
Yeah. So ATs Care is, short elevator speech is it's a group of ATs looking to improve the mental health care of their colleagues. We do a couple of things that are, that kind of embody that. Obviously, what the ATs Care person did for me was that individual intervention. So, I was going through a crisis. They called me individually and said, hey, kind of talk me through it. Let's just talk one-on-one. Another thing that we do is kind of a post-event assessment. So think of like the Boston Marathon. So there was obviously a large group of athletic trainers who were working at the Boston Marathon, when that whole event happened. And so there was, after the event, you do basically like a group debriefing, and kind of identify if any of the athletic trainers need more of that individual intervention, or kind of further mental health intervention. The other part that we do is trainings. So if you're interested in more about learning about ATs Care, want one more piece of, want to learn about one of the pieces of the mental health kind of first aid that we do, or tools that you can use for yourself. That's something that we do. I know that this group is only a few years old, so a lot of us are really trying to get trained in like the individual intervention, the group intervention. There's also an advanced individual intervention training. I haven't done that one yet, but it's on the docket. And then you can, once you do like all of those, you can train to be an instructor. So it just takes a little bit of time. I know that you can take some of these trainings like in your own state that aren't athletic training related. I personally like the athletic training ones because they're more relevant to me. Plus, you get to meet a group of other athletic trainers who are awesome, and yeah, I like to give back to the NATA too if I can. So, I prefer to go that route. So
makes sense. Are all these trainings that you were referencing, are they taught by fellow athletic trainers, or are they bringing in, because I asked just out of curiosity, because we are trying to really work on our mental health within the institution I'm at within athletics, but there's that fine line of like what's within your scope, but when are you jumping over to this counseling scope? And so I was just curious as to how this group has gone and kind of built on those trainings.
Yeah, great question. So the past two trainings that I have done, the individual and the group training, those were both done by Tim Neal. He is an athletic trainer. I believe he is at Concordia University in Ann Arbor. And he's phenomenal. He is a fantastic instructor. And so, but the ATs Care Commission, and I know at FWADA we're working on kind of setting up our own, and I think they do it kind of differently in each district or each state, whatnot. But I believe that the commission, the national one, is I don't know what the correct term of it, but overseen, I guess, by a psychologist. His name is George Everly. He's fantastic. Whenever we do our, we like to call it, we dump our buckets. So whenever we've kind of got, we do it a couple of times a year. Everything that we kind of been going through, we just kind of dump our buckets, and George will lead those sometimes, or kind of challenge us sometimes, kind of depending on what's going on. But he kind of oversees, I don't want to say overseas, but he works with all of us. Like I said, I don't know what the proper term is.
No, I get what you're saying. I know we get, and I guess somewhat rightfully so, from some of those counseling and testing professionals and those ones where it's just like, well, stay in your lane. It's just like, well, yeah, I'm not trying to work through mental health illnesses here, but sometimes people just need people to talk to. So
yeah, and I think I think we have the ability to work with psychologists, and we have the ability to work with counselors, just like we have the ability to work with PTs, right? I mean, there's a lot of PTs that have that same sort of sentiment of stay in your lane. It's like, yeah, but I have the ability to identify when, I think this patient would be better served if they went through PT. I feel like I have the ability, because I have the training, to be able to say, well, you know what? I think that this patient would be better served seeing a psychologist or seeing a counselor, because, the things that they're going through is beyond my scope. And, I have a plan, and I have the ability to be able to identify it and be able to move it on. That's why I would equate to some of these trainings as more of like a mental health first aid.
Yep.
Um, you know, we can identify when somebody has an ankle sprain, right? We
Right.
have the ability to say, we don't have x-ray vision, but we have the ability to say, you know what, I don't think it's just an ankle sprain, like we're going to refer you on. And I would equate to this as kind of something similar.
I like that. Puts it in terms we all understand.
Absolutely. And and I love that analogy of,
Hmm.
because everybody
It's a good
tries to
one.
stay to everybody tries to talk about like ending the stigma, and being able to put it in terms that athletic trainers can relate to, can be incredibly helpful. And why I think that ATs Care it can be so beneficial is that, when I was going through this crisis with Richard, was I going to call like my corporate people? No, because I don't know them. Like, I
Right.
don't think that they could understand what I'm going through on a daily basis. Um, and so I would much rather talk to another athletic trainer who I don't feel is going to talk to me like I'm not a professional and doesn't know the sort of things that I'm going to have to go through, over the next 48, 72 hours. So that's, I think, is something unique in this group, is that we're other athletic trainers looking to help our colleagues,
Hmm.
or our students, our future
Right.
colleagues. So
So now that I'm looking at this question, I'm trying to figure out if I want to change how it's asked. But I guess even potentially you could answer this two ways, kind of maybe pre-COVID and now in COVID, because there could be some changes, I would guess. But do you see common trends within the athletic training profession that we seem to be dealing with? Obviously, and hopefully, you know, student athlete deaths or patient deaths are few and far between, as much as possible with everything else we can do to help that out. But just kind of other things that you might see athletic trainers dealing with.
yeah, so I go back to the bottling it up, and this kind of being like a bucket, or like a bottle of pop or cola or whatever people call it. If you take that bottle, and you kind of go through a little bit of stress and you shake it up, and you keep on shaking it up, with everything that you're going through, and it's not even just a death of a patient or family member. It's I had to do the emergency action plan for the first time, or I'd use the AED on somebody. I broke up with my boyfriend of like 10 years. I don't know, whatever it could be. Um, I think that, especially athletic trainers, we tend to bottle, and like I said, we like to put on that front of like, I've got everything together. I'm here to do my job, and I'm gonna keep my bucket where it's at. Like, I don't want to dump anything out of my bucket. I think if we did more of, that's the healthy stress relief, um, I think it would go a long way towards our mental health. I take my students through this self-care assessment, every couple of months, and it's interesting, and it handles a lot of different facets of self-care. Um, I think we could do, I won't say that I'm perfect either, because I'm definitely not. But I think we could do a lot better ways to, kind of take care of ourselves, and not just our patients. Um, Joel, what do you like to do, like outside of work? Do you have a stress reliever?
Um, that's a tough one. Probably a lot of reading and just continuing to work on projects, because even when I get out of work, like I've decided currently back at school, so that adds things to it. But yeah, other than probably just hanging out and
Reading
relaxing.
projects.
We
Yeah,
have by the
it's
time this
interesting.
comes, by the time
No,
when
go
this
ahead.
comes out, we'll have our first child
is my guess. So I'm sure my stress relieving will somehow revolve around hanging out with the baby. So
There you go. Yeah. I mean, and making sure that we like do those sort of things every day,
mhm.
or, set time aside for ourselves to do those sort of things, I think is just so important. Like I play video games. I love playing video games.
I
I
play a little Mario
PlayStation.
Kart Tour on my iPhone. That's my
Oh yeah.
go-to. Yeah.
There you go. Um, yeah, I like to play the Switch. We have like all the PlayStations. We have like a whole gaming
Nice.
thing in our house. Yeah. So, but I take the time, like every Saturday, like we make sure to sit down and play some video games. My husband and I, we used to do like a Sunday morning brunch where we would just go to a new breakfast place
Yep.
and try a new breakfast place and put our phones away, so having those, having those little outlets to kind of manage that and do self-care and be around people that, kind of help us empty our buckets, taking care of ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, is so, 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 so important.
Yeah, I can believe that. That kind of leads right into the next question I had, and that was, what barriers have you come across with athletic trainers reaching out for help? And I will be the first one to go along with everything you say. Like, I'm not usually one to reach out for help. I think I've gotten way better at it. I've had this conversation with younger ATs that have come through. Like, in grad school, like, work came home with me. I was stressed. How do I fix this? What do I do? Da da da. I don't do that hardly ever anymore. Um, Not in regard to athlete care because of everything. There's sometimes when you've got a pandemic, you think about things a little bit at
Right.
home, and some other things like that. But so I've gotten better at separating them,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
probably still not going to reach out for help. So I guess back to the question: what barriers have you come across?
Yeah, so the not wanting to reach out for help is definitely, common trend. Like I said, I didn't reach out for help because I didn't know what ATs Care was. It was a very new program, kind of when I went through this. Um, but I think the best part was that I had somebody kind of in my circle that I felt like I could trust to talk about that sort of thing. So I would say, you know, making sure you have people in your circle. I know it's not a barrier, but if
Mm-hmm.
especially the young professionals don't have that circle of trust just yet. So not knowing somebody on the team. I mean, I will say me when the ATs Care person was like calling me and texting me. Again, I was in that ugly cry, like in my office sort of thing. And I didn't want to like pick up the phone because I am super self-conscious about how I sound when I'm upset. And
Okay.
so I was like, I'm like ugly crying right now. And I don't want somebody to like hear me ugly cry. so, so that was, I mean, another barrier for me, that people are just self-conscious about it. You know, I know that there was, an AED incident, at UNLV, and I had a friend of a friend who was like, "Hey, you might need to reach out to this person." And so I was like, "Yeah, sure. Let me know what their contact info is," and da da
Mm-hmm.
da. And they were kind of like, "I don't know if she should reach out. Like, he might be okay, and he might not be, but I don't know." And they were kind of like, "Well, let's just see how it goes. Like, wait until tomorrow." I mean, he was okay, but to me at that point, it's just like, hey, maybe you just need to vent. Maybe you just need to talk to somebody. Like, I don't know. Like, just if you want to call me. But I think that might be the other part of it. I think the biggest is the self-conscious part.
Sure.
Just I don't know somebody, or I don't want to put myself out there, or I don't know how it's going to look to me. But we're completely confidential. We don't record anything. We don't write anything down. It's again, if you were to go see an athletic trainer for some sort of, physical first aid, we document it, we address it, and we don't talk about it with anybody else. So unless obviously you are a harm to yourself or others, then
Sure, right. Kind of off of that, and this is more for my own curiosity, for an AT staff, or even somebody in your role, when you look at like your students as you referenced, what general recommendations would you have for like me, who's not super old in the profession, but have some younger staff members, and we've got a couple positions that turn over quickly because they're part-time, and so we usually get younger staff members. Gone are the days of the graduate assistant, but you are still going to get young professionals coming right out of grad school. Are there things that people can look out for, or should best practices for maybe checking in with them, to maybe just offer not necessarily the ATs care level of help, but even to get that first, like, hey, what's going on? All right, if you don't want to talk to me, which maybe not want to talk to your boss, but here's a resource. Any best practices or thoughts there?
Sure. Yeah. I would say know who your rep is in your state. Do you know who your rep is in your state?
Not a clue. I knew you were going to ask that.
I would say know who your rep is in your state. Maybe talk about it at your next state meeting or state gathering, figure out who your person is. Or on the NATA website, it has who each of the district representatives are with their contact info. So you could even shoot an email to your district rep and say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm doing best for, my staff. Who are the reps in our state? If we were to ever have an issue, call them, say hi. It doesn't need to be you don't need to just call them if there's a crazy emergency. So I'd say, reach out to them, say, hey, this is who we are. We were talking with an ATs care person. We were interested in who our rep was. I know at my school, at SHAP, when, I have athletic training students as well. And we usually do kind of a debrief of the week every Friday, after football games. So, it's that time where you're kind of you're cleaning up and, kind of making sure things are good for next week. And you kind of just sit down as a group as you're waiting for the guys to get changed out of their pads and helmets, and, waiting for guys to kind of trickle in, before the weekend starts, and we say, hey, how do you think everything went this week? They usually have pencil and paper and stuff like that. And they say, these are all the questions that I had. This again is sometimes where we have, emergencies in the middle of a Friday night football game. It's a great time to sit, hey, how do you think it went? Stuff like that. And just kind of talking with them, same things you would notice maybe in an athlete, are there, is what they're doing changing? Are they usually happy, bubbly person? And then, they don't talk to you. They're super moody. They have an outburst of some kind that's just uncharacteristic of them. Things like that to look out for is always good. And just, me, I love to just get to know as many student athletes and many of the students as I can, and again, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to say hi to every single person every single day. If you get to know them at some level, then you can more easily identify those changes of hey, you're acting differently than you normally do. And you can get the trust of your athletes too, to say, hey, so-and-so is acting normally or differently than they normally do. Maybe you need to talk to them and maybe they need some help. So I think the more people that you can kind of get on your team, it can be your biggest help there. So I would say just talk to everybody, even just a fist bump, say what's up, and and just checking in, especially those, like you said, those young professionals, those students,
right,
saying, hey, how do you think this went? And kind of just letting them kind of express themselves dump those buckets.
Sounds good. Kind of the last general question I had is, there's obviously the high school and the traditional quote unquote setting with, college and sports and everything like that, but obviously a lot of new ones coming up, physician, extender, industrial. Do you see any different issues based on those specific settings?
Yeah, I would say that, kind of like I was talking about earlier, it's so much harder to reach out to people that you don't know. There's very few reasons why, unless you had somebody transferring over or something like that, that I would think that, a university athletic trainer would just want to call or email like a high school, a secondary school athletic trainer, right? So, that, again, that instance of, somebody using an AED on university athletes, like, okay, well, I can, go online and I can try and find their phone number, their email address. But, unless I know them personally, it's a little bit harder to kind of make contact with that head athletic trainer. Usually it's like a friend of a friend, kind of saying like, hey, they need some help. So I think that might be one of the biggest issues, setting it just at least from an athletic trainer to another athletic trainer standpoint. The other thing I would think is just kind of like how each different like mental health support system is set up. So I know, like for us, like I teach at the high school that I'm the AT at. So, I know a lot of the services that are available to student athletes. An athletic trainer who isn't there during the school day might not be aware of those same resources. So, trying to kind of piece all those together can be challenging, depending on how your high school is kind of set up. I know like the university setting, it's so different for each university. So I know when I was at Michigan, we had social workers who were part of the athletic staff. So if one of our athletes wanted to talk to the social worker, they were right in the same building.
Mm-hmm.
I know that other universities are not like that. Like they have like a specific like counseling center or something like that, to where if they have an issue, then they have to go to the counseling center that's open for all students on campus. And in my experience, that it can be a little hit or miss, with kind of like the level of care. Not saying anything bad about the people who work there, but just experiences from other people can vary, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be, trying to establish kind of those procedures, I would think at the university level would be a little bit more challenging. And then I would say in other settings, I think it would be the same sort of challenges that they would get for going to see a physician. So like if it was a circ athlete, I don't know how their kind of mental health or, that's kind of all set up. But, I would, from my understanding of, things like that, is that they would have to go, to their own sort of like counseling center, just like they do a physician. They have one that they kind of like suggest, but, that doesn't always happen. So I would think that would be maybe just a sprinkle of some of the settings, but there's so many settings nowadays in AT. But yeah, I'm open to people talking about it on Twitter.
For sure. Anything else around ATs Care that we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about?
I would just say, for people who are listening to this, look over your mental health emergency action plan for yourself, and look over your mental health emergency action plan for your patients. Do you have a plan? What is your plan? If someone is talking about hurting themselves or hurting others, or if they're not and they're just struggling, do you have a plan? Come up with a plan. I think that would be my biggest piece of advice. Have a plan, just like you would if somebody needed to be C-spined.
Sure. No, I think that's really good. That's something, again, we've been fortunate enough, we made a really good hire in a staff member whose passion for mental health is very, very up there. And so they've taken it and run, and we utilize the I Can Help methodology for looking at, potentially somebody wanting to injure themselves, and have actually trained up our staff, and not only in the AT realm, but also the coaches, which I thought
Awesome.
was really good. And it's been fun to see it come together, because it is something that, I don't know, it would have been harder to do if you don't find somebody that has that passion. So if I had a recommendation for
Absolutely.
people, hire somebody that has a passion for this, because it is going to be hugely impactful.
Absolutely.
Well, with that, do you want to jump into the athletic training chat questions?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. First one is, where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years? And if you can kind of set the example, it doesn't have to necessarily be everything, but what you see.
Sure. Well, hopefully, like you were kind of talking about, we take a little bit more focus on mental health. But I know, at least in Las Vegas, there's a lot of industrial opportunities that are kind of starting to explode. And I think that people in the industrial setting are really seeing the value in us. So I'm hoping that in the next 5 to 10 years, we explode a little bit more in the industrial setting, and that there are also more athletic trainers that can value themselves as an individual business, and maybe be maybe their own, I mean, obviously still under the direction of a physician, but kind of taking it upon themselves and saying like, well, I can make money by myself if I do it smarts, and I intelligently, and correctly, and I can, I I don't need the man to try and tell me what to do. I'm good at what I do, and I can do it by myself. So I think that there might be a few more athletic trainers willing to take that risk.
Sometime around the release of your episode, we'll just say after, so I keep that, we're actually going to have an interview with an entrepreneur who has gone off on their own. So that we'll buddy that right up. It'll work well.
That's awesome.
What advice would you give yourself if you could go back as a younger athletic trainer and tell yourself something?
I think especially when I was in school, I was so worried about like what other people thought of me. And so I would probably just tell myself, like, you are who you are. Nobody else is going to change who you are. Just you have to accept it before other people are going to accept it. And everybody else can either take the heat or they can get out of the kitchen. So you do you, boo. And I would also say that it's okay to not be okay. I think that was one of the biggest things that I had learned through this ATs Care process, that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to let other people see that sometimes. Like, you don't have to be Superwoman all the time. It's okay to not be okay. Tell somebody about it. Tell a friend about it. And then I probably just give myself like just a big hug. Just be like, you're gonna do great things. Just stick with it.
Sounds good. What has been the most influential resource that you've come across in your career?
Definitely my peers, my colleagues. They're like, I can only fit so much RAM up in my head. And so, I gotta connect the internet, to my friends and to other people. Yeah, my friends, my colleagues, my husband is an incredible person. He's not an athletic trainer, but he's like one of the biggest AT advocates.
Nice.
So he's just wonderful. Um, there was a joke for the longest time that he was more involved in athletic training than I was, because he was like speaking at our district meetings and like all these sort of things. Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just trying to get my life together a little bit. Yeah, he's amazing. I would say, and again, this is like shameless self plug for ATs Care, but you go to all these like CEUs and all these professional development things, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Like, maybe take like one piece, from here, one piece from there, whatever it might be. But that 2-day training of like, crisis intervention for individuals was the best training I have ever done in my entire life. And I can say that with strong confidence. Like, it made me a better athletic trainer, like talking with patients. It made me, a better teacher talking with my students. It made me a better friend to people around me. Because I had tools to talk to them better about things that they were going through. So I would say those 3 things.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
If you could change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a common practice, a mindset, etc., in the field of athletic training, what would it be?
My students know that I have like a strong hatred towards ice. I just think it's so lazy. If I could just never hear the word ice ever again, I would be really happy.
That makes me happy.
I hate ice so much. And ibuprofen is also like my biggest enemy. Like people think it's just like this magical, like cure all, like take 2, call me in the morning sort of thing. It's funny too, because my husband will even like tell me, he's like, if you're feeling like you have stomach ache or something like that, just like take a couple ibuprofen, like it's fine. I'm like, I don't need ibuprofen. Like, I know why I'm feeling this way. Like, I just need to fix it. I don't need the Band-Aid. I need,
Sure,
the wound care, whatever it might be. But if those 2 things could just like disappear from everything, I would be a much better person, a much happier person, I should say.
Yeah, hard to argue with that one. I will agree. Finally, what does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
I use this analogy when talking about why I love athletic training. I really like puzzles, just of any kind. Do you do any puzzles, Joel?
I enjoy just doing like the traditional puzzles,
Like putting the pieces together?
like pieces together, because it's
do you
just
do like
mindless.
Sudoku or anything like that? Like,
I've done some Sudoku. I'm not very good at it.
that's fair.
Life gives me crap because I will just stay on the difficult version because I can actually complete them, which is nice. She's on like diabolical and will sit and stare at it for days, and I don't have that kind of patience.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. So I see athletic training like a puzzle like that, whether it be Sudoku or like word searches or, doing like a physical puzzle. And so I always feel like, you get a patient and you're like, oh, like my goal is to solve the patient's pain, right? Or whatever it might be. And so, the more questions, the more observations, the more, special tests, palpations, whatever it might be, all of those things are different pieces to the puzzle. And the more, that you learn about how to put those pieces together, the easier that the puzzle is to complete. And, you can take on more complex puzzles.
Sure.
So to me, patience like that is a puzzle. And I'm like obsessed with puzzles. I love puzzles. We go down to, we have like a house in Arizona right on Colorado River. And I will literally like sit in the water and just do puzzles like all day, and we'll just have the time of my life. So, being an athletic trainer to me is just a master puzzle solver.
I like it. That's a unique analogy that I haven't heard, but I do like that. In kind of closing, anything else you'd like to share? And then on top of that, if people wanted to reach out to you, what is the best way?
Awesome. So I would say if you're trying to reach out to your ATs Care team, if you just Google NATA ATs Care, there, kind of like I was telling you, Joel, there's, your representative for each of your districts, ways to contact them. And they can figure out how to contact your local ATs Care team or representative. I mean, I have like 7 email addresses, so I never tell people to email me. But I am Shap ATH training on Twitter, CHAPATH on Twitter. So if you want to tweet at me, you can, or what do the kids say? Slide into my DMs, whatever that is.
Maybe.
I think I'm also on Instagram. I'm trying to figure that social media platform out.
Fair enough.
It's interesting. But I keep Snapchat and Facebook for my personal use.
Makes sense.
But the last thing I would say to all of our lovely listeners would be do something for yourself today. Do something for yourself today too, Joel.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you so much for being a part of it. This gave a great background to ATs Care, for myself, for I'm sure everybody listening too. So that is very much appreciated.
Absolutely.